Hi, friend. I've always wondered why people who age well swear by kindness. Turns out it's science. Up to 40% of our happiness comes from just this one thing. Listen today to find out what that is. Today, I am chatting with Linda Cohen about why being kind might just be the ultimate tool for aging like a badass mother. Please continue to subscribe and to share the podcast. You're helping us reach new people every week all over the world. It's incredible. Together, we're helping others rethink what it means to be healthy and to live an amazing life right up until the end. So, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You mean the world to me. Hi, friend. Are you looking to age healthfully, confidently, and vibrantly? Then this podcast is for you. Smart, slightly salty, irreverent, and thought-provoking. I'm Lauren Bernig, and this is Age Like a Badass Mother. Linda Cohen is an expert on kindness, a sought-after keynote speaker, and the author of 2 books, The Economy of Kindness, How Kindness Transforms Your Bottom Line, and 1,000 Mitzvahs, How Small Acts of Kindness Can Heal, Inspire, and Change Your Life. I want to talk to her today because after interviewing so many people about why they're aging well, one thing comes up over and over, and that's being kind. So I want to learn more about kindness and its connection to aging well. So please welcome Linda Cohen.
Thank you, Lauren.
Hi,
I'm
Linda.
so glad you reached out to me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm really glad to talk to you. I was Googling experts in kindness and you came up, and then one thing that caught my eye was that you were a waitress in the Catskills, and we used to go to the Catskills when I was a kid. Yay,
Awesome.
I know,
Yep.
right? And
That was right
not
after Dirty
common
Dancing.
thing.
So, it was a timely time to be in the Catskills.
I know. And I always when I give talks, I always talk about my family and I say we were, just like the family from Dirty Dancing, except without all the hotness and ability to dance. So
my dad was a good dancer, actually. The only time I ever danced well is when he was the leader. So
oh, that's so cute. So for those who don't know, well, we'll get to the mitzvahs in a minute, but I want to go back to maybe some of the things that, you did waitress, you were a housekeeper at a hotel,
Yep.
right? And then you were also, you worked at a facility for aged people. And so I want to know what life skills you picked up from all of those things, or what lessons.
Oh, I think it's just, meeting people where they're at. I'm such an extrovert though, Lauren. So I feel like my superpower is just curiosity and connecting with people. I want to know human beings. So, if you sit next to me on an airplane, probably we're going to have a conversation. When I was waitressing, and I didn't just waitress in the Catskills, I put myself through college, kosher deli in Los Angeles, a home a home kind of style cooking in Massachusetts, my first year of college. So waitressing was always just this great place to meet people. And I feel like that's a skill, honestly, I think could be really beneficial for everybody to learn is service, serving someone else in whatever capacity that is. In the senior living organization, I was an assistant activities director, which was super fun in my 20s, to be able to have a relationship with women and men in their 90s and their 80s, and just the wisdom they bestowed on me absolutely impacted me. In fact, one of the women, Rose Brown, I had broken up with somebody in Los Angeles where I'd gone to college. I had moved back to Boston, and I had met Aaron, a software engineer, another young fellow. And I didn't know if I was making the right decision. And Rose Brown actually gave me some counsel, and Aaron and I ended up getting married. We've been married. It'll be 33 years in February. So, yeah.
What did Rose Brown say to you?
I think she told me, and I have to say, I kind of went back and was like, what would she have asked me? What values does he have? What does he want to do with his life? And also to meet his family. And I do remember meeting his family in Detroit soon after we were dating, maybe for a year, and he could not have fallen very far from the tree because he had such an amazing family. So that's what I took away from what she advised.
Oh, that's good. do you remember any of the other things that you learned? Did you learn just like from talking to them or observing,
I will
or
say 2 things. I mean,
probably a mixture?
seniors, I still work with seniors. That's a lot of the work I'm doing currently is with, leaders who lead organizations that take care of seniors at different times in their lives. And I will say a senior brings so much wisdom, so much lived experience around life and loss and the importance of things. And so I feel like that's what I got in my 20s in that first job experience. What was hard for me was that there was mortality. And I had residents that I befriended who died. And I just remember I was only in that job for a couple of years because at 23, I said, oh my gosh, I wasn't ready for mortality. And I think now I'm in my 50s. And of course, I've had many of my own losses in my life. And it's like you begin to realize that life is going to have loss. It's just part of what happens with this little life we're given. So
Mm. Yeah. And did you have any takeaways from like the way people aged, like, there's always like the curmudgeon-y people who usually have a gushy inside, or like they're hard on the outside and soft on the inside, or like what were some of the things that you observed and learned just from seeing them?
I don't actually remember someone who was curmudgeon-y. I do know people like that, have known people like that since that job experience, but I feel like sometimes and even in my kindness work, I feel like sometimes the curmudgeon-y person has really dealt with a lot in their life and they haven't had a way to move through that. And that's what they're holding on to, is that those hardnesses are sort of difficult for them. And if they're ever given the opportunity to be gushy or to share that, sometimes that loosens them up. So I say kill them with kindness if you can. If somebody who's, mean or isn't acting in the kindest way, maybe that's something that just, if you love on them, maybe you'll be able to break through that hard exterior for them.
Yeah. Okay, so I know you weren't born a kindness expert, but you became one because I guess so you were living with your dad, right? When you were a
Yes.
teenager,
Yes.
and so but that's kind of odd in itself, right? Your parents got divorced and then you lived with your dad. That's a
My
little
mom
bit
actually had mental
different.
health
How did that
challenges, which does play out later on in her
uh
life, and she was hospitalized. And so we went to live with my dad. And my brother was in 5th grade, I was in 7th grade, and it was only supposed to be for maybe the year. But there was kind of a battle over who would have our guardianship, and my dad wanted to have us till we graduated high school. So yeah, we left suburban Massachusetts and moved to rural Vermont, where my dad had left the big city and in the 70s moved to the Vermont rural area. And
oh
it
my
was
gosh.
very hard as a 7th grader to do that, to have my whole life uprooted. And my relationship with my dad was difficult because of that. I think I didn't have the ability to process in 7th grade who I was upset with, but I took it out on my stepmother, and my dad was in the middle of that. And it was a challenging teenage years, I will say.
Right. But as it is, I mean, I could kind of say the same thing. Like I really have a very similar situation, actually, where I didn't live with my dad, but we had a difficult relationship, and a lot of it was with his wife, and I took it out on him and he took things out on me, and but now we have repaired our relationship, which is nice. I think when you are older and you soften and you can see them as a human and not just a parent,
Well, you're lucky if you take time to do
you're
that, because that does not always happen. And
right.
actually, my story is that I didn't do that until I found out my dad was dying. It was when he told me he was dying of lung cancer and I was 38 and married and had my 2 kids already. I knew that our relationship was still stuck like 16-year-old and a parent. And I knew, and we were living across the country from each other. I lived out on the West Coast at that point, and he was still in Vermont. And I thought, if I'm going to make any amends, it has to happen right now. And the last 8 months of his life were those months to spend. I was back in Vermont 3 times in that period of time, one of which was a 4-day weekend where we just watched old movies and laughed and cried and said, will you forgive me? So I have always felt like that was a really important piece of the part to get to the other side of the healing after he was gone.
I mean, it's really smart that you did that. Did you say those words to him? Will you
Yeah,
forgive me?
my dad was a therapist.
I,
So Yes,
Oh,
he was easy
that's
to,
awful.
I think my dad he always loved me. It was like, now, like you said, when you get older, you realize what it would have been like to parent a child, with the skills you had at that time. I mean, my dad came over from Germany as a 4-year-old. He was raised by two parents who were German in New York City, very, like Jewish, sort of Orthodox upbringing, which did not fit my father. And he always rebelled against that. And then in my teenage years, I kind of went back to that. So we have this whole like cycle of all the different things that, were problematic, I think, for our relationship. So yeah, he got mad at me when in my 16 years old, decided I wanted to keep kosher, the kosher dietary laws. And that was like the worst thing I could ever ask for. That was the worst thing I was doing as a rebellious teenager. So
Oh my
I know.
god, that's so okay, that's opposite for me. Um, I was like a real rebellious
Yeah. Well,
teenager.
and I think in my head, I was like, why are
Oh
you
my
so angry about
gosh.
this? Ridiculous. You're like, I'm going back to my roots. But, we all take our own journey. And I think if life teaches us anything, it's like, oh, well, that was problematic for him because of his own challenges with his mother, with the way he was observing his religion, and so, yeah, lots of healing. Lots of healing has happened both before he passed away and, of course, in the 19 years since. So,
Right. Okay. And so, which brings us to a
yes.
thousand mitzvahs. And for those who don't know what a mitzvah is, it's an act of
Yep.
kindness, right? A
Yep.
good deed.
10 commandments. The
Yeah.
10 commandments are actually mitzvahs. Did you know that in
Oh,
the 613?
that,
Yep.
well, you know what? I didn't. I heard you say that when I was
Yeah.
researching you, but I'm not a very
Yeah.
observant
Yeah.
religious Jew, and so I don't know that. But I mean, we obviously that was thrown around at my house, to
Yeah.
do mitzvahs and things like that. But I didn't realize that there were six. What did you say?
613,
630.
many of which we can't do because they're related to agriculture um, or other things. But there are many of them we can do. There are positive mitzvahs and negative mitzvahs. And my category was really to look at loving kindness, anything that really promotes loving
Yeah.
kindness as a way to do something in your day to day life.
What are there any mitzvahs that are listed that stand out to you that you
Oh,
can
that's so
remember
interesting. I
or
have a
that you
friend and I
know of?
study with her now weekly. We're actually like a Jewish study partner. And we actually wrote down mitzvahs that out of the 613 that really resonated for us. Um, Returning something that's lost was a mitzvah I remember writing on that list.
Oh, that's a
Yeah, that's a
good
really good
one.
one. I mean, they're simple. That's so interesting. There are little ones and there are big ones, and each one is just as important. So don't, and there were things like smiling, letting someone in traffic, and I was like living a modern life thinking, okay, well, does that count as a mitzvah? Oh, actually, one of my mitzvahs, replacing a roll of toilet paper, which ended up
Yeah,
being this silly
that's
one
a
that I
good
could
one.
talk about. And, people would ask me about, but
But that's not in
it's not.
listed as a mitzvah, letting someone in
No,
traffic and
no, no,
replacing a
but
roll
we
of toilet.
know
So,
that
what are ones that
those
were
are gestures
listed?
of acknowledging someone else and doing something for another person. And I'm sure if we just had a broader category, it would certainly fit into those categories.
So, how did you get this
Yeah.
idea? Okay, in my dad's honor, I'm going to do 1,000 mitzvahs. Where did that come
Divine. I
from?
really don't know. It was 5 weeks after my dad had passed away. My dad died December 1st. So it was like the middle of the winter, so dark, really long nights. And I woke up in the middle of the night with just this idea. And I remember playing it out in my head. And I woke my husband, Aaron, up the next day. And I was like, I want to do something to honor my dad. And luckily, he's like the computer guy, the science guy. And he goes, well, how are you going to know you've done 1,000 mitzvahs? And he said, let's start a blog for you. And this was January 2007. So blogs were kind of newish then.
Oh,
And he helped
yeah.
me start my
Hmm.
blog. And I never set out to do anything bigger than just kind of grieve for my dad. And it transformed my life. This opportunity, to write. I mean, writing is really therapeutic, to go out every day to look for ways I could do little acts of kindness. And I know we're going to talk about a little bit the science of kindness. But that
Hmm.
actually was incredibly helpful in my healing, to be doing that, to be outwardly actively looking for ways to do kindness. So I had stepped into something kind of without thinking about it that would really change my life forever. And it has in amazing, amazing good
Yeah.
ways. So
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that you were just trying to grieve, but in being kind to others, it really
Yeah.
healed you. It so that's kind of what I'm
Yeah.
interested in is like why is that? Why is it when we do something for somebody else, it feels so good to us? Yeah,
All right, I'll
let's
tell
talk
you a
about
little
the
bit of the
science a
science, and
little
I
bit
will
if you
tell for
know.
your listeners if you want to follow an amazing place where they do tons of research about this, the Greater Good Science Center is in Berkeley at Berkeley, University of Berkeley, California. They have a whole department that studies so many of these pro social different things you can do, and so much of their research has been impactful for me. So a couple of things. First is doing acts of kindness sets off your serotonin and that oxytocin, those feel good hormones. That's why when you volunteer, and I was a volunteer a lot when my kids were little at the school or their art camp, you have like a high, a helper's high from volunteering. And I know when I talk to people about that, if you're having a bad day and you go volunteer, chances are you will leave that situation feeling better because of that oxytocin, serotonin that gets released. So that's one thing. There's research by a psychology professor at UC Riverside, Dr. Sonia Lubomirsky, and she studied happiness, like our own internal happiness. And her research showed that 40% of your happiness comes from your genetics. So I'm sorry, 50% comes from your genetics. So you can't control that. And it is why sometimes you'll meet somebody who feels a little happier than the average person. Probably they have great genes. 10% comes from your living circumstances or your work circumstances. I would add that too. But it left 40% of the pie. So, what else impacts your internal happiness? And I often will say when I'm in an audience, people have said, oh, how much money I make or don't make, or whether I'm married or not, or whether I have children or not. But her research actually showed that your intentional actions impact your own happiness. So I didn't know that research when I stepped into that Thousand Mitzvahs project. But when I learned that research, what I realized was I had discovered that. I had discovered that by going out and doing acts of kindness, I was impacting my own internal happiness. And I love sharing that research because I think, especially now, we're living in a world where people feel really hopeless. I feel like more and more people feel overwhelmed and hopeless than ever in the last 10, 15 years that I've been speaking about kindness. So I want to invite you to think about that. I want people to realize you have a choice how you act or react, what actions you take in any situation, even the ones you don't feel like you have a lot of control over.
I know. That's so we have a lot of control over what we can say, what we can
Totally.
do. And okay, so you're saying that in a situation where we feel helpless, hopeless, the best thing to do is to just do something for
Do
somebody
something for
else.
someone else. Or, I mean, let's say you have somebody, perfect example. I remember we were coming out of COVID and we started going back out. We're at a restaurant and I remember running into this waitress and we were on the road and she was bawling when she first came up to serve us. She was a little slow to come greet us. And she said, somebody just threw silverware at me. And
Oh
all my
my
husband and I
god.
could think about, like, don't go back on the road after COVID if you cannot control yourself and you cannot be kind to the waitress who's clearly understaffed, right? And so what could we
People forgot how
totally.
to
So
act.
I just remember my husband and I going, "Oh, sweetheart, we will not do anything like that. We are so happy to have you as our waitress." What we could do in that moment was assure her that there was still kind people in the world. And daily there are possibilities of actions like that you could take. I'm even thinking somebody yells at you, maybe you're at work and somebody yells at you. Do you immediately yell back? Or do you pause and they go, wow, something's probably going on for that person. This isn't like them. What's going on? And you pause and you take a minute to like be kind back to them, even though they weren't kind to you. So I think when you know
Mhm.
this as a possibility, it's like you can pause and you can choose how you want to act or react. Um,
Yeah. When you said, returning
yeah.
lost things
Yeah.
to somebody, it made me think of I was on the trail, walking one day and I lost my key
Oh,
fob. Well, it that's it. I wasn't going to be able to get in
yeah.
my car when I got back and And so I got back to my car and I was like checking the car and I'm looking around and somebody came up to me and they're like, "Are you looking for your key fob?" And I said, they go, "What are you
Yeah.
looking for?" And I said, "My key." And she goes, "Is this
Oh,
it?" And she realized it was the
yeah,
same
of
kind
course.
of, matched the car that I was looking at. And I was like, "Oh my
Thank
gosh."
you.
I just almost
Of
started
course.
sobbing. And she said, we knew that somebody was going to be looking for this. And so she's like, "We've been hanging out for like 30 minutes." I was like,
That's
that was like the kindest thing somebody could have
totally.
done. And then recently I was at Whole Foods and I was trying to park my car and I don't know why, like I was trying to get in this tight space or other space, but I nicked this
Yep.
guy's car and I was like, "Oh God." And he was sitting in the car and I got out and I was like, "I just can't even believe I don't know what
Yeah.
I was thinking trying to get in
Yeah.
this spot." And he got out and he was like this old farmer dude in this old truck. And
Yeah.
he goes, "You know what? Just don't worry about it." He's like, "It's a little
Yeah.
nick and I have an old truck and I'm not going to make you go through hoops to whatever." And I
Yeah.
started crying. Like I literally just started crying because in my mind I was like, "Oh, now I got to deal with insurance.
Right.
Now I got to do
Right.
this. Now." And the relief I felt from that, and I said, "You know what? I want to tell you something. I'm going to pay this forward today in
Yeah.
several ways." And I did. I found
Good.
ways. The lady had all her kids out on the street with a
Yeah.
sign and needed rent. I mean, that was the
Yeah.
easiest one, obviously, the easiest one to pay forward. But yeah, I did a couple of other things that day, and it made me feel so good and so connected to
Yeah.
that man, to the people I did a little
Yep.
kindness for. Really does boost you.
So you're reminding me there's a gentleman named Steve Hartman, and I don't usually tell people to watch TV, the news especially, but Steve Hartman is a journalist who is on CBS, and he's on the road with Steve Hartman. Listeners, look
Oh
him up.
yeah, I've
His
seen him.
stories are amazing. People always send them to me.
Is that the one with his
Yes,
little
during the
kids?
pandemic, he had
With
3
his
kids. He
kids
was
he
at
does?
home. He did a whole
Uh-huh.
Kindness 101 series
Yeah,
for
yeah,
teachers.
yeah.
But a few years ago, he did a special on kindness. It was like an hour-long special, and he had an MIT professor talk about the ripple effect. That's kind of what you're sharing right there, which is when somebody does a kindness for you and you feel that relief, you're just like, I want to go do kindness for other people. And she showed that if
Mm.
everybody who gets one act of kindness did one more act of kindness, like just the amount of kindness that would spread through the universe. And it was amazing because it was all just, mathematics. But of course, if you are, and by the way, I'll tell you, I'm not the only one in this space. Like when I started speaking about kindness in 2011 or whatever, it's been quite a long time. I felt like a lone wolf. People would often say like, "Oh, that's so sweet. You're so, we really need that message." Now there are men and women around the globe also wanting a different paradigm in the world. And so people are
Mhm.
speaking about it, people are teaching about it, people are writing about it. It's been so amazing to me to be connected with so many other people who they want this. We're not living in a world that we all want, and what can we do to make it better? And so that's been kind of exciting, actually, to be collaborating. I'm actually part of, I'll just make a little pitch for the Human Summit, World Kindness Day, November 13th. We're having a virtual program, which people can join, 5-hour virtual program talking about kindness that you can do personally, that you can do in your workplaces, in your communities. And I'm going to be the closing keynote speaker for that. I'm really excited. So yeah,
Oh,
maybe I'll
that's
send you the
nice.
link. You can
Yeah, we
include
can
that if any
definitely.
of your listeners want to. And it's only
Yeah, for sure.
$50. I mean, we've kept it priced so reasonably as a virtual event that hopefully everybody who would want to can join.
Is this more like for a
It's
workplace
both.
thing
It's
or
both.
for
It's
like
personal and
both?
professional. We expect that there will be people whose workplaces have maybe embraced the idea of kindness in the workplace, but also if people personally just don't like what's happening in the world and want to do something, that's what they can do.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel like our world is it's funny. It's like a kind of a paradox because the world seems very divided, but that's on
Oh, yeah.
purpose. And when you are, out and out with the real world,
Yeah.
with real people,
Yeah.
it's not like that. Like I said, this
Yeah.
farmer guy,
Yeah.
I mean, he probably could not be any more
He's
different
not different
than
though.
than me.
Right. I
Exactly.
feel like the media has done us no services in the last couple of decades. They
Exactly.
have made us more divided, and you're right, it's purposeful, and I don't like that. I was sitting with someone yesterday, and we were talking about the fact that if we could demand that the media stop leading with the negativity. I mean, because unfortunately most of the 17, I heard a number one, 17 bad news stories every half an hour for the one good news story they'll show us. And we know that that's not what's
Oh
happening in
yeah.
the world. We know that, because if you do dig into this, you'll find that there is a lot of good. There's a lot of good happening everywhere. Um, it's just not what gets
Always.
amplified. Yeah.
Always when right, when you see, an emergency
Yep.
or you see a
Yep.
flood and then people are coming with their own
Yep.
personal little
Yeah.
boats to rescue people. It's
Look
always
for the
like they don't
helpers. It's
ask
what
you.
Mr. Rogers says. Look
Yes,
for the
right.
helpers.
Look for
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
helpers. Right. Nobody asks like, what's your
Exactly.
politics when they're about to rescue you? They're just I mean, it's just we're not
I know.
divided. It's just, a made up thing to divide
I
us. You're
know.
right. And so I think that that's something that we really, really have to keep front of mind right
Totally.
now. And that,
Well, that's when each
so
of us has a
how,
choice to choose how we would like to act or react. When we see something, we can fan the flames of the negativity, or we can say, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to share that. I'm going to share something good. I'm going to share what's happening in my world. It's actually one of the things I talk about with organizations. Share the good stories that I know are happening in your organizations. Put those out into the newspaper. Put those onto the local television show. Let those be the things that the coverage gets picked up. Yeah. Right.
mhm, yes, that's very good advice. So as this relates to aging, what do you think it is about kindness that helps us age well?
I think you have a different mindset. If you have decided, I was 38 when I took on that mitzvah project, but I feel younger than I think my age is because for 20 years I have been spending time thinking about kindness. It's hard to be, I don't know if I can swear on your podcast, but it's hard to be
Yes,
a bitch when
absolutely,
you're
you
called the
can.
kindness catalyst. So, reel it back in, Linda. The day I go to the dentist and they're late or something happens and I'm like angry, and then I have to take a breath and be like, oh no, I can't do that. And so it helps you think back about how you can be kinder. And it's not to say that I haven't had difficult people in my life or difficult situations. It's really, I think kindness has to start with yourself. So your own self-talk, what you're listening to, what you're watching, how you are walking through the world. All of those things I think play into choosing to be kinder in this world as it is right now. So
So you think it's more of like it's like a mental
totally.
thing. You just have a different mindset
Totally.
if you're focusing on
You are.
kindness.
You are.
I
And
agree
you're
with that.
bucking the norm a little bit. You are. But these days I would say there's more and more people who are trying to buck that norm, whatever that norm is that's being told to us.
I think so. I think you're right. And I think that you do like, well, we just talked about this before. We're the same age and we're both 57 or you're going to be 57 any day.
Yay.
Yeah. But you do have like a little glow about you,
Yeah.
and you come across as a younger type person just because of that. And so do you have like do you catch yourself saying negative things to yourself and then correct you
Oh
or
my gosh.
correct yourself? Like
I'm
what's
just
that?
laughing. Yes. Let me give you this one. As long as I can be a little bit authentic and sort of. Okay.
Yes,
So
you could be all authentic. That's
how
what
long
this
will
is
it
about.
be? Okay. Well, whenever this will air.
It'll probably be within the
Okay,
next
fine.
month.
So
So
recently,
I'll try and get it out before your
okay, perfect.
summit.
Recently, I was speaking to a healthcare organization. They had actually hired me to speak for a 3.5 hour morning session and a 2.5 hour afternoon session. And when I looked at my day, that was longer than I have ever presented. I do a lot of
Wait, they wanted you to present for three
Three
and
and
a
a half
half
hour
hours and
keynote,
then two
yes.
and a half?
So that's a lot for me. My keynotes are often
That's
90
ridiculous.
minutes. I've done 2.5 hours, but
Yeah.
then I don't have anything in the afternoon. So I was kind of stressed about this. I will be honest. And it's in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
It's senior living. I speak a lot in senior living, but I was definitely in the weeks leading up to it. I reached out to speakers who I know speak longer, trainers, whatever, what advice they had for me. And they gave me great advice. Some were like, in the middle of your time, go upstairs, take a shower, change your clothes, change your shoes, have your lunch, take a nap. You have time for a 15-minute reset and then walk down to your afternoon session. You'll feel much better. And it was fabulous advice. But here's what happened the night before. So the night before, I'm at the hotel at the conference center. And in the middle of the night, as I'm bitching about this 5 hours or 6 hours that I'm going to be on stage, this is what my inner voice said: Linda, shut the F up. Stop complaining about the work you love doing, the people you are going to get to touch today. Think about the firefighters you've talked to, the nurses who do 12-hour shifts, the senior living professionals that you're going to be talking to whose days are filled with so much work. Stop complaining. And that was literally and I was like, you're right. So
Linda, you're
I
right.
couldn't believe, I was like, okay, in her voice, So that's, I guess,
Oh
part
my
of what it is
God.
do you catch yourself and do you say, stop it? This is what I love doing. I feel so called to do this work that I need to stop bitching about it. So, yeah,
Oh my
that was kind
God.
of the inner talk.
I think that that's, we all
Yes.
do that, right? And I think that I think I have that DNA that when you were talking about like happiness or kindness, a lot of it, a lot of happiness or a lot of kindness is in your DNA. I think that I have uh, kind of happy
Yeah.
DNA,
Yeah.
it's just part of me. But I'm also a real person and I also like, start saying crappy things to
Sure.
myself but I do catch myself. I do catch myself and that's the thing. Like I don't let myself talk to
Yeah.
myself
Yeah.
in that crappy way. I'm always like stop that. Now I'll say something nice,
Exactly.
like what you used to do with your kids when they were
Exactly.
little. Don't talk to each other that way. Now say something nice to your brother or,
Well, and it's always like,
and
think
so
of
I
how
do the
you would
same
talk to
thing.
a friend in that situation. If you can take yourself out of the
Yeah.
equation, you could say, if a friend was coming to me with what I'm struggling with, how would I talk to them? And that's how you can revisit what the inner dialogue is. I mean, of course, we're all going to have inner dialogue that isn't as kind, but when we get aware of it and at least catch it, we can improve it, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. So I want to go back to the
Yeah.
mitzvahs. I want to talk more. Will you give me some examples of mitzvahs that you did?
Yes. I wish I had thought to grab my book. It's down on my bookshelf. Mitzvahs that I did. Um, you know,
Or just
I
ideas for people? I mean,
volunteered in a lot of different ways in those years. I would, find little ways that I could do what's in my wheelhouse. And I always will encourage people, if you want to add kindness to your world, do what comes naturally to you. If you're a singer, write a song for someone. If you're a poet, write a poem for someone. If you bake for people. Like, do whatever it is that gives you joy and spread that and share that with other people. Definitely do what's
oh,
in your
that's good.
wheelhouse. Um, I'm trying to think of, smiling. I remember I wrote a lot about these little simple things, putting change in a coin canister. And I remember one time, like, does that matter? Like how much change, my 25 cents. And I actually looked it up and it was like for a Meals on Wheels kind of program, our quarters added up to, $20,000. I think it was a day of serving their senior population by those little quarters that people were donating. So, don't underestimate the quarter. What else? Calling someone when you think about them. I'm really intentional. When I think about someone, I assume that's a hit from sort of the universe for me to check in with someone. And I'll
Oh,
try to like
wow. That's a
check in
good
with
one.
them then. If I find out it's somebody's birthday, I love making a little video or sending a quick text, just making sure they know I'm thinking about them. And I've been the recipient of pretty much all these same things, sending a note, I have had so many stories in my audiences, and heard just amazing things. A teacher who gets a note 20 years later from their fifth grade student saying, my parents were getting divorced when I was in fifth grade, and you were the only steady adult in my life, and thanking them 20 years later. So there's no time limit on going back and letting a coach or a mentor or somebody know how they impacted you. And I think now actually those would be received even more than ever before, because you don't know where that's catching that
Yes.
person in this time of their life.
I love that one. Yeah, I actually did that. I reached out. I wasn't able to find this teacher
Yeah.
online, but I found her
Okay.
son, and I haven't heard back from him, but I have sent him several notes because my mother, there was a math teacher who lived in our street, and nobody in my family can do math, and my mother would send me down to this poor lady's house. I can't tell you how many nights a week for me to get help with my
Wow.
homework. This poor woman, I mean, she's in the middle of, she has a baby and she's making dinner and I'm there with my homework, and she never turned me away,
Oh,
never. And so I was like, as a kid, you
right.
don't know if your parent sends you down the street, you just
Right.
go. And I'm like, this poor
Yeah.
lady. And so I really wanted her son, who was that
Right.
baby, I wrote him, and hopefully he got that
That's
to her if
fabulous.
she's still alive even. But yeah, I think that I like
Well,
that there's no
there's no
time
time limit.
limit. I
I'll
love
add some
that.
other ones because, now I do a lot of work with organizations. So I created a kindness bingo card, which was sort of a fun way to bring kindness to the workplace, especially senior living. Bingo is sort of a big thing in senior living. But on the different squares, it was like, smile at a coworker you struggle with, invite someone to sit with you at lunch who you don't know, let someone know how they impacted you in your workplace. So trying to create different ways that we could elevate kindness in the workplace, and get the kind of behavior we would like to exemplify. So I try to gamify all my work on kindness when I'm in a workplace because, I think everybody knows what kindness is, but if we can really dive deeper into what does this look like in real lived life in a work setting, that's something that I've tried to do a lot in
Mhm.
the last 5 years.
So what's your best piece of advice then? It doesn't have to be about aging, but
Best
do you have a best piece of
piece of
advice
advice. Well, I'm still a napper,
that
Lauren. So I would say,
oh
take a
yeah.
little break if you can in the middle of the day, even if you are working in an office building, lay under your desk if you have to. I think the 3 o'clock lull, 2 o'clock lull is pretty real. Especially, I wake up early. I go to bed kind of early and I wake up pretty early. So by 3 o'clock, I need something to refresh me. So
How long do
it's
you
like
nap?
15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. That's really
You just set your
all I need.
timer?
Actually, I fall asleep because I've been doing this so long. I have like a little guided meditation I often will do. And I've done that so many times that even without hearing it, it's in my head. And I put a pillow under my knees and I lay down and my body just knows, oh, this is time. This is her nap. Like this is kindergarten stuff.
This is nappy
It is.
time. Get your
Yeah.
mat,
Yeah. Yeah.
Linda. But do you set a timer to wake
No,
up though? I mean,
I've never, no.
no? You only sleep for
I do.
15
My body
minutes?
just wakes up. I mean, again,
That's
because I've kind of
amazing.
told it this is what we're doing right now. If you
Yeah.
think you aren't going to wake up, of course, set a timer. I think
Yeah.
sleep. I think
I
I'll
do
just
that
add
too.
to that sleep in general. And as you hit a certain age for women, it gets so much harder. With menopause, things change in our bodies, but sleep, I think, is something really important to protect. And whatever we can do to, I think that would be the advice I would give is, try to protect your sleep at all costs and see if you can find ways to be really regular about that, if at all possible. I moved a dog out of my
Yeah.
bed. I had
I
dogs that were in our bed, and it was like, no way, a few years ago, that's crazy. And people are like, you're never going to get your dog out of your bed that they were raised. Nope. That dog was out of the bed and has been out of the bed now for a couple of years. So, you know,
yes. I know. I have a big dog. She sleeps on the floor
okay,
next
well,
to
that's
us.
good.
But yeah, you can't have
No,
that in the bed. I mean, some people sleep fine with their dog, but I feel like
right,
that wakes you up
right,
a
right.
lot. Yeah, I like the idea of a nap, and I do that too. Sometimes I'll be like, I just have to close my eyes for
Totally.
15 minutes. You don't want to do it too long.
No,
Yeah, I think that's
yeah.
refreshing and good.
I would say the other big
Do
piece of
you,
advice is monitor your media diet. I talk about gulping media, which is where I think we are if you are 24/7 or it's on your watch or it's on your computer. you are getting way more media than you probably should mental health wise. So instead of gulping it, sip it. And so in the last 5-10 years, we have absolutely shifted how we receive media. And I promise you, I don't miss anything. I still hear about it. If you're on any kind of social media or any kind of newsletters, you still will hear the big important things that impact your community and your world. But I think you can take less of it in. So, and it doesn't serve us. I don't think we're wired for the amount of 24/7 we are wired into these days. I think it's really hurting people in a big way.
I think that's very, very smart. I know you touched on that your mom had some mental health issues and that your dad died of lung cancer, but is there any takeaways you have from watching your
Yeah,
parents
I know that was one
age?
of your questions, and I was thinking about it. My dad died at 70. My mom, she actually committed. She ended her own life at 75. She had mental health challenges. She was
Mm.
hospitalized several times in my life, and it finally, it was what took her. So what I have witnessed, I have in-laws who are 92 and 88 now, and what I have witnessed, both situations of aging, they're different. I lost both my parents kind of young, so I haven't had the aging process with them at all, or even knowing what my genes would have been had they not had those two ways that they passed away. My dad was a smoker, like a huge smoker, so of course lung cancer is not shocking that that's what he died of. My in-laws, they're living to be much older. So we're having all the conversations now about how are they going to move to the end of their life in a way that feels dignity, and they still have to they can make choices. So I think the thing I'm taking away is, I think in my 70s, maybe mid 70s, if I'm still alive, I need to make the decisions about what I want with the last chapter of my life, because I don't want to put that weight on my children. I don't think that feels fair. And I'm sure at 70, it's going to feel really young to be making those decisions. But I think that's the smart way to handle your own life. Otherwise, somebody else is going to make those decisions for you, and
I think we probably are actually at the
okay.
age where we should do that. You never know what's
Okay.
going to happen. I just had I haven't done it, but I had an expert on about parenting aging parents
Yeah.
recently, and I was thinking the same thing
70.
you were like, oh yeah, when I'm in my
She
70s,
says now
then I'll do that.
57.
She's
Are we
like,
supposed to be doing it now?
I mean, it's not 57, but she just said, you just
Yeah.
sooner
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
later. But I mean, that's one of those things that you probably put off, but I think
Well,
that's
I
good.
think that's what we're all
Do you
afraid
have
to talk about dying. It's the craziest thing. Hello. There
well,
is no
yeah,
other
of course.
alternative.
We know it's
There's no
happening.
other alternative.
Yes.
So why are we afraid of it? Why are we so afraid of it? Because it feels so, so difficult to think about. I don't know. And I feel like
I mean, I'm not
I'm not
afraid of
really
it.
afraid of it either. I actually read the obituaries. I love reading people's obituaries. I think they're really beautiful. And when I started speaking, initially funeral directors started asking me to come speak. And I remember my first Funeral Directors Association conference. It was so cool. There were like hearses and, vases. And I was walking around the trade show. Like it was kind of cool. I was like, okay.
What'd you
We
talk
talked about
about?
kindness in the workplace. Actually,
But I mean, what, as a legacy
they were
or
having one of the organizations was having some generational challenges because they have new funeral directors, younger, who are coming in, and then there were funeral directors who are kind of old school, and a lot has changed in the funeral industry. I mean, cremation now, where it was a very little piece of their industry, has become a huge piece of the industry now, and so that has been challenging. Also, technology. When we got into COVID and, there were streaming of services, that was like a whole new thing. And, plus people can choose so many different ways to do a funeral now. It isn't like you have to go to the funeral home. So it's been, the industry has been evolving. And so kindness
oh,
around.
that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Do you have a favorite health or beauty
you asked me
product?
that. Okay. So my hair is straightened today, which is crazy only because it was, a no hair wash day, but my hair looks like yours, curly. And I don't know if I'm saying the
Uh-huh.
name of this product right. Ouidad. I think it's Ouidad. And a friend of mine recommended the
Oh.
product line a few years ago, and it has changed my life in terms of curly hair days. So they have great,
Okay,
it's
will you spell that again?
Ouidad. And they have a shampoo, they have a conditioner,
Okay.
they have all sorts of products you put in after you wash your hair. And it has changed how my curls look. So I don't know what you're doing.
So it's for
It's for
curly
curly
hair?
haired women. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe men too. But yeah, I love it.
Mm.
I've become a
Yeah.
huge fan of their product line. So yeah.
Okay. And then what is your favorite concert
I
you've
need,
ever been
okay, so
to?
this is so silly. I grew up in Vermont. I was a high schooler in Vermont. Guess what? We don't get concerts where I lived. My very
Oh, yeah,
first
that's right.
concert was James Taylor when I was married, after I got married at 25 with my husband, Tanglewood, Massachusetts. And I was like, yep, that was my first concert.
Oh
So
my
I know I missed.
gosh. I've seen him.
He's
He's
a
a
great
great
performer, but I
performer.
missed a whole chunk. I love music, and I married somebody who's really into music and lived in Michigan, got to see all sorts of great live, musical groups, but I didn't. So now I would say I love blues. We have a blues festival every year in Portland on 4th of July, and we go pretty much every year. And I would say that's been one of my favorite concerts, getting introduced to blues and rock kind of musicians. So, but yeah, I don't have the traditional. I wish I did. I
Okay.
was like, there's so many musicians. I wish I had heard it.
Boy, you can still go to
I
concerts
could,
now?
I
You didn't
could,
have to be a
I could.
teenager?
You're right. I actually have started roller skating, Lauren. I've started doing a lot of things that I
Oh,
didn't, that I either did as a kid that may brought me joy, or things maybe I felt like I missed out on. So yeah.
so are you rollerblading or is this four wheels? Are you
Four
on two
wheels
wheels or
at a
four
roller skating
or
rink. There's a
four
roller skating
wheels?
rink in Portland that's
How
still got the wooden
fun.
floor, just like when I was 12 back in Vermont. And I've done it like 5 times, and then it got to be summer. And so I haven't been doing it much since the summery months, but it's really fun. And it's like riding a bike. You do not forget. And it
Yeah.
brings me so much
Yeah.
joy. And I brought a
I liked
friend.
roller
We've gone a
skating.
couple
Yeah.
times. So
Oh, that's good. I like that, Linda.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing all your
Thank
good
you.
advice about kindness.
Thank you.
So, everybody go out and do something kind and get the ripple effect going.
You'll age well.
Yeah. Age well. All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Linda. Take care. Thanks for listening, friend. From my heart to yours, be well until we meet again.